Good morning. I am recording the sermon from last Sunday because for the third week in a row, we have encountered technical difficulties. I'm pretty sure that the video did stream on Sunday without problems, but it wasn't saved. And so therefore, I find myself re-recording it. It is Tuesday morning, December 20th, 2021. It's about 11 o'clock in the morning. And so here we go. Our splash screen telling that we are an educational group here. These videos are for our Christian education, and the copyrights concerning everybody's copyright is here, the Greek and Hebrew, the Bible translations, and so forth, along with my copyright. Today our lesson is 1 Samuel chapter 22, a story of Saul and the wicked man that he actually became. Please like and comment on this video. That will help us get more exposure on the internet. Click to subscribe, and that will let you know when we are going online. And if you are not a brick and mortar parishioner, but you are an internet parishioner, please consider donating online to Cheshire-Church.com. I wanted to talk to you about the wickedness that became King Saul in the scripture in 1 Samuel chapter 22, but I wanted to kind of mention this guy, Idi Amin. He rose to power in the country of Uganda, and he was at first a guy who was in the British military when the British ruled the country. And he came up through the ranks through ruthlessness, and eventually he deposed the democratically elected leader of Uganda after the British left the country, and he ruled ruthlessly and just a horrible, horrible person during the 1970s. He murdered many, many people. Amnesty International estimates that he murdered 500,000 people, 500,000 people during his reign. Other estimates are as low as 100,000, but even still, even if it was just 100,000, just a terrible reign of terror. So I wanted to point him out as the kind of guy, the kind of actions from a ruler that we see from King Saul in biblical times. So I just wanted to mention this guy. He was later deposed. He fled from Uganda to Libya and then to some other place, and ultimately Saudi Arabia gave him sanctuary, where he lived another 13 or 14 years in the nation of Saudi Arabia and lived kind of a lavish lifestyle. And when he died, I actually was in Uganda when he died, and his family wanted to bring him back and have him buried in Uganda. And there was this big fight in the newspapers, and you know, some of the people who were Amin loyalists and his family wanted him to be buried there, but most of the nation was just furious that this would even be a possibility. In the end, he was not allowed to be buried in Uganda, and he's buried in Saudi Arabia. So just wanted to mention this horrible person and kind of give you an idea of the type of things that King Saul was also capable of in our Bible passage this morning. Saul the madman. Now let me kind of put this lesson in context in case this is the only sermon you're listening to. Previously in the narrative, Saul's daughter, Michal, was King David, ultimately the man who became king, David's wife. And she tips him off that her father is trying to kill him, so she lets him out through a window, and he escapes and leaves the area. Jonathan, who is Michal's brother and David's best friend, also tips him off and tells him that he better get on the run because Saul is intending to kill him. So David flees a few miles to the Jewish shrine, which is in the city or the village or whatever it was of Nob. And there he meets the priest of that shrine, and his name is Ahimelech. And so David asks Ahimelech for some food, and the priest says, well, I don't have any regular food. All I have is the holy bread. It's not lawful for you to eat it, but I'll give it to you anyway. And so he takes 5 of the 12 holy breads and gives them to David as he's fleeing. Now, Ahimelech did not know that David was fleeing. And also, David asked for any sword that might be there, because David actually knew there was a sword there, because when he had killed the giant Goliath some years earlier, he had given the sword to the priesthood there, and it was behind the ephod, and it was concealed, but it was there. And so Ahimelech gives Goliath's sword to David. And then David asks for prayer. And so Ahimelech prays for David, which he had done many times before. And so David runs out of there and goes to Gath, which is the city of Israel's enemies. It's the Philistine people who he's been fighting for years as a commander in Saul's army. So he escapes to Gath, the place where Goliath was actually from. And he thinks nobody will recognize him there because, they didn't have selfies and they didn't have cell phones. And, it was really kind of a primitive time. And so he thinks he can go there incognito. But then somebody says, hey, isn't this the king of Israel? I mean, isn't this the guy David who people said Saul has slain thousands and David 10,000s? And so the king of Gath, Achish, says, let me see who he is. And so David becomes afraid and he pretends to be a madman. He lets spit run down on his beard and he scratches in the wall, and probably he was unkempt. They didn't have showers and things like that like we do. And so the king of Achish says, this guy's nuts. Get rid of him. So here we can see Jerusalem is not yet Jerusalem. It's Jebus. And Saul is up here in this area, in Mizpah, Jeba, up in that area. So when David escapes from this area, he runs down, just a few miles to Nob, and he meets the priest. And then after he meets the priest, he goes all the way down here into Philistia, to the capital city of the Philistines. There were actually 5 kings of the Philistines. This is one of them. And so he escapes there. He's afraid he'll be found out. And so he leaves there and he goes over to Adullam, where there's a cave. And that's where we pick up the story today. So David left there, that's Gath, and he escaped to the cave of Adullam. When his brothers and all his father's house heard of it, they went down there to him. Now, we see that it was now dangerous for David's parents and David's family to stay in their own homestead. They had valuable sheep, they had a house, they had land, and so David is on the run. So it becomes difficult for these people. So they have to escape to be with David.